Okay, excellent, excellent. Welcome everyone here and online. It's great to have Talmud together again in a nice full room here. Let me go ahead and share where we are in our Talmud study. Let me make that a little bit bigger for you. And of course, we will begin with our blessing for the study of Torah, which this counts as, since Talmud is all about the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshana b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. If you say Amen, you get full credit, and we will. We are still in brachot, and we're still talking not just about blessings, not just about the Shema, although in this case we are going to talk a little bit about the Shema. So we start with our Mishnah. Matni. So this is how we know these big letters. Sorry, let me get this thing out of the way. These letters up here, this is how you know you're starting a Mishnah. So one who recites Shema, Hokorei et Shema, and did not recite it in a manner audible to his own ear, Velo Hishmia le'ozno, so he couldn't hear it in his ear, either because he read inaudibly or because he is deaf, fulfilled his obligation. However, Rabbi Yossi says he did not fulfill his obligation. So we're setting up here that we have the balance. Whenever we get a general opinion offered like that, that means that it's the Chachamim, the wise. Chachamim means wise ones, but it just means the rabbis. It's the general opinion of the rabbis of the time. Rabbi Yossi dissents. He says, if you mumble it, or maybe if you're deaf. Again, just as a reminder, the bold is the direct translation of the Aramaic or Hebrew. In this case, it's Hebrew, but of the Mishnaic Hebrew. The non-bolded text is the Steinsaltz edition from the commentaries. So when you look at a page of Talmud and see everything around it, Steinsaltz brings that stuff into the text so that you can read it with commentary as it was meant to be understood by you. In this case, we added the deaf before, not because we were actively thinking about it, but because that's how the rabbis thought about it. Rabbi Yossi may not be speaking about the deaf consciously when he says lo yatsa, right? They're not yotze. They have not fulfilled their obligation. One who recited Shema and was not sufficiently precise in his enunciation of its letters, Rabbi Yossi says he fulfills Yatsa. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo Yatsa. This is interesting, right?
But they don't explain why they think he didn't fulfill it.
That's right. Thankfully, we have the Gemara, which will come after the Mishnah, after this, where the rabbis that come after them will say, what exactly do they mean by some of these things? But for the moment, the Mishnah is just teaching us. If you were to just read the Mishnah, what's interesting to me about this, of course, is that Rabbi Yossi is the one who says, if you go, Rabbi Yossi says that's no good.
Right. But if you pronounce
but for him, so we're establishing strata, right? Who holds that it's pretty much always good as long as you're meaning to say it? The general Chachamim, the rabbis. Rabbi Yossi has a slightly more stringent position. He says you can't just say nothing. You can't just. But if you go Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai, if you do that, you're good. Even if it was a little imprecise, you're good, right? He says you did it at least. You're Yatzah. It might not be perfect, but it's fulfilled. It's sufficient. Rabbi Yehuda, now we get an even higher level of stringency. He says, that's not enough, right? We get from this word dikduk or midakdek, this word dikduk is grammar, but but here we get didek in the Mishnaic Hebrew, didek be otioteha. So in the letters, right? In otiot are letters, right? So it's like, so someone who is not really accurate, precise, midakdek. When we say someone's that's like being, I don't know. Today in modern Hebrew, if you were to call someone midakdek, you'd generally be saying it because they're what we'd call in English anal retentive. They are uptight. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Thank you, Internet. I'm sorry. Uptight is a better way of saying that. So today you would call them uptight. But at the time, we in Hebrew we call that midakdek. Anyway, Rabbi Yehuda says he does not fulfill his obligation, and we don't have to get more about that right now. It's the Mishnah. Remember, the Mishnah assembled in the earlier part of the Talmudic period, in the 100 to 300 era of the Common Era, has very, very many fewer rabbis around, and with a lot less expertise than would later be developed. They were the initial rabbis, many of them teaching the teachings of the Zugot period, Hillel and Shammai, the period where there were often only a couple of rabbis and then their students, not very many. And so there's much less detail necessarily in the Mishnah.
And am I right that the Mishnah simply presents what is correct and the Gemara explains it?
Not exactly. It's the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the rabbi's first draft of explaining the Torah, essentially explaining the Torah and explaining Judaism in a post-temple world. The Gemara is like if your kid built. This is bad. Sorry, I'm not going to use. That's a really dumb metaphor, and nobody can relate to it. The Gemara smooths those cracks. The Mishnah leaves a lot of cracks, some of them big crevices, especially in things like kashrut. And the Gemara comes in to say, well, to finesse it, to say, well, we got a putty here, we got to put a whole new drywall over there, we got to, they do that. They remodel, essentially, the Mishnah's position so that it is coherent. And detailed enough to at least somewhat live by. Because again, that's why the Mishnah exists in the first place, is that the Jews of 2,000 years ago look at the Torah and they say, this is a great, really nice scroll you got here. I like it. But we have to give back, we have to cancel all loans every 7 years? We have to give back if I buy a house in year 49 and then the Jubilee happens, I have to give it back the next year? I just won't buy one, or I won't give money, or I won't, and so society didn't function. And so the rabbis have to come along and say, this might have been fine 1,000 years ago from their perspective, but clearly in order to operate today, we need to modernize. I can't imagine who that sounds like. All I know is Chabad would call them heretics. No, I'm just kidding, of course. But the point is, of course, right? They follow those rules, which in fact are just reforms, I use that word intentionally, on the system as it existed. It's not a new system. It's an adaptation. Modern Jews, post-Haskalah, Jewish Enlightenment, also adapt to the world as it is, rather than the world as it might have been 1,000 years ago, with ghettos and anti-Semitism, specific kinds of anti-Semitism and different things that made Jews have to be one way. Jews were suddenly able to be in different ways, and so we needed a more modern, adaptable system. Some of us haven't figured that out yet, that's fine. But in any event, we are constantly adapting, and this is the process of adaptation in over the course of 600 years, just seized together essentially. Indeed. Thank you. Good questions. So we're still in the Mishnah here of this Mishnah, and we are told by the Stama'itic voice, the general voice of the Mishnah and Gemara. One who recited Shema out of order. Well, actually, sorry, I shouldn't say that. In the Mishnah, when it's an unattributed voice, generally we attribute it to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the redactor of the Mishnah. When it's the Gemara, we just call them the Stam. We don't really know who that person is. But when it's the Mishnah, we don't just call it the Stam. We generally attribute it to Rabbi or Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who's the same guy. Okay, one who recited Shema out of order. So you didn't say it right. What have you said? Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. That's weird, right? It's really strange. I had to really think about it to make sure I could say the words because I'm used to saying them in a different order. But if you recited it out of order, meaning you didn't read the verses sequentially, lo yatsa. No, you did not fulfill the obligation that you are chayav or chayevet. If you're a man or woman, sorry, I'm calling you chayevet. The Gemara does not believe you are chayevet. Just to be very clear, but I think you are. If you're chayevet or obligated, you must yatsa or yotz. You must become yotze or yotzet, I guess, for a woman. In that commandment, you have to fulfill it. In this case, you do not. One who recited and erred should return to the place in Shema that he erred. This is a rule that eventually has a much broader application, which is if you mess up a prayer, you go back and say it right. We don't just say prayers and we said it wrong, right? What is important in prayer? We've gone over this before, so this is a review. There are two elements.
Intent.
Which has the name kavanah, right? And the other one? Intention is good. But we're not new age hippies. Sorry, I'm sounding like I don't know who anymore. But we don't just go, the intention. Right? That's not Judaism. What's the other part?
Accuracy.
Close. There's a word. There's an English word, I guess, and a Hebrew word for sure. Keva. Rote. Recitation. Keva means a line. It means there is a way that you do it. There are words. There's a liturgy. It's not just made up. You don't just say, oh God. This is also part of why, by the way, Christians are really into spontaneous prayer, and Jews very much are not. People are always asking me, Rabbi, and I feel like I've got to come up with my own Yiddishisms like Fiddler on the Roof. Like people come up and they say, Rabbi, is there a blessing for this particular moment? And I go, yes, of course there is, but I got to look it up because we don't just make them up on the spot. I have to give you the exact blessing that there is. Except in Fiddler on the Roof, of course, he makes one up, which strange. An Orthodox rabbi would never do that. But unless I guess he was kidding. They might do that. He didn't seem to be kidding in the movie. We can analyze the movie at a later point in time. It doesn't need to be now. Anyway, also it was made by a guy named Norman Jewison who wasn't Jewish, so make of that what you will. In any event, so one should return to the place that you erred and get it right. Don't just go, okay, we move on. Now, there are certain circumstances in which you can fudge certain things to protect someone's dignity so that you don't embarrass them. But there are also places where I don't care how undignified it is. You correct them. And then there are mixed cases, like with the Torah. The Torah is not usually thought of as a mixed case. Why? If you get it wrong, there's a person supposed to be there to correct you. There's a gabbai. If I'm reading the Torah If someone else is reading the Torah here, I serve as Gabbai. If I'm reading the Torah, I serve as my own Gabbai, and I keep a tikkun off to the side so I can check myself if necessary. I'd love to train someone to be a Gabbai, by the way, to Gabbai for me. It's not right that I Gabbai myself. But we have someone to check you specifically. And the congregation in many shuls will check you. In some shuls, I've heard it, where if somebody gets it wrong, somebody out in the crowd will correct the word. Now, it's not the tune necessarily that we're correcting. If someone's like shaky, but they're getting the words right, that's okay. Obviously, it's not perfect. We'd prefer you do it all perfectly, but it's okay. The tune is beautification. The words are very important. If you get them wrong, we actively correct you, except in the case of someone who essentially shuts down from their failure. And if someone they just keep messing up, it's obvious there's a block there, you just let them finish. Some shuls might actually go back and have someone else do it in their place afterwards, but you don't keep correcting them. Because at that point, you're not doing them or yourselves any good. You've really thrown them, they're totally off, and it's just not kind. It's not respectful, it's not dignified to keep shouting at a person who's clearly struggling and failing up in front of their community. We don't do that. So after a couple times, it's more than a couple, but after a couple times, everyone just shuts up and lets them finish what they're doing, and then we move on to the next thing. Because dignity, not embarrassing people, is crucially important.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If someone has the intent, but for some reason, whether they've had a stroke or were born with some sort of thing, and they cannot say the words right, no matter how hard they try, what then?
They fulfill the commandment by reciting them in their head, by thinking them, No. The rabbis, no. The Gemara, again, they will come back in because people will ask questions like that. That's why, by the way, it said for someone who is deaf, i.e. someone who couldn't, why can't a deaf person do it? They could speak theoretically, but they've never heard it. So they can't say it correctly. So they don't have to say it at all. They fulfill the mitzvah just by thinking it, again, because we don't want to embarrass them. We don't want to tell them, you were born deaf. And even if you could learn to read, even if you overcame all your struggles, God will never be satisfied with your prayer because you can't say it the right way. That would be a terrible thing to say, and we don't say that, is the answer. That's why it says up here at the thing, that's why it says either, right, they will come back around, they will come back around. There are, and also Judaism, with all the adherence, with all the talk of halakha, it sounds like it's very formalized and standard everywhere. But even within Orthodox communities, there are minhagim that are different, very different from each other sometimes, that the rabbi of the community gets to make their own, they get to postgame, they get to rule on issues. And for an individual, sometimes it's a case-by-case basis. Often you'll get, the most common one I can think of is birth control is always forbidden in Judaism, just for fun. But you can get an exception. And normally it's given in the case of women who've had difficult pregnancies for whom doctors don't want them to risk becoming pregnant again. And so the woman will go to the rabbi and say, Rabbi, I'm not supposed to use birth control. God says it's evil. But the doctor said I shouldn't have another kid. And the rabbi will say, that's an easy answer. You'll go on birth control. Because your life is more important than the particular rule. And that's okay. That happens every day in Orthodox communities. Totally fine. Yeah.
Is birth control against the law across Judaism in Reform too?
No, my problem is we don't have law that way. We don't think about the law that way.
I've just never heard that.
Yeah, birth control is not you're it's you. There's a
There ought to be
positive
certain
commandment.
kinds of birth control that wouldn't be, no?
There are certain kinds of birth control.
It says you shouldn't waste your.
You see,
Sure, yeah, right. But it's actually really all birth control because you are commanded to what?
Be fruitful and
be fruitful.
multiply.
Okay.
Pru revu is one of the first commandments. So, again, in Orthodox communities, they don't use it. Again, unless they have heter, unless they have a rabbinic piece of paper that says, I'm the rabbi and I say they can. Because I studied the material and it's up to me to make that ruling. Hence why rabbi in Orthodox communities is a little bit of a different job than rabbi in this community. Because a lot of their job is people coming to them and them issuing rulings on how they live their life. I get very few people coming to me asking for rulings on how they live their life. I'm happy to give them my opinion, and I'm happy to give them... No, I would never do that. I would give them Judaism's opinion if they came to me and asked for it. And some people do that. They ask for what Judaism's opinion on something they want to do in their personal life is. But they very rarely come and say, Rabbi, I need a ruling on how to live my life. Though that would be perfectly fine if they wanted to. It's just not common in our community.
Forgive me for being talkative.
No, it's
I
okay.
have a problem with the whole idea what Judaism's ruling is. I mean, there's Orthodox Judaism and there's been interpretive Judaisms.
I would argue Orthodox Judaism is interpretive Judaism too. But, well, first of all, when someone comes to me and asks for advice on things that have to do with Jewish topics, I generally start with giving them an answer based in tradition and then explaining how we understand it in our tradition.
Yeah.
I feel that's the only authentic way to do that. But I'd never end it with, here is what you're going to do. Which, except in matters of rabbinic prerogative. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. That's a term of art, essentially.
What does it mean to be spiritual?
What does it mean to be spiritual? That's an
And
interesting
would that-
question.
And would that be enough to meet the requirements?
No. That part of the question I can answer for you right off the bat. What does it mean to be spiritual? In Judaism, I guess it would mean, the closest thing I could think of in Judaism is like someone who has a soul full of emunah, faith, right? What does it mean to be a spiritual person in Judaism? It's someone who maybe they don't pray every day, but they seek Jewish guidance on how they live their lives. That would be kind of Jewish spiritualism, if there was, as much as there is such a thing. Spiritualism kind of came about long after Judaism, so it's as far as what do you mean by spiritual, I guess is my question, without making it too personal a session.
It's essentially a matter of faith that you believe in God and the power of God, but you don't quite have a grasp of the specifics of how to offer a prayer, as we're discussing. You know, you make a mistake, or you're not perfect in the presentation. Does that in some way diminish your spirituality?
No. First of all, I think it's a good question. I think that there's a story in the Talmud. No, it's probably not in the Talmud. It's probably Midrash. Of a man who does nothing. He's a Jewish man who does nothing Jewish, essentially, except one thing. He says this one prayer. It could be a Asher Yatzar. It could be Eloheinu Shama. One of those morning blessings that you're supposed to say every day when you get up. And he passes away, and God is especially mournful And an angel comes up to God and asks, why do you mourn this particular guy? He didn't keep kosher. He didn't do halacha. He didn't do any of the things you want him to do. And God says, but this one prayer he did was so heartfelt and so dependable that it made up for everything else. I like that story because I think that the rabbis are shooting for 90%. They want you to get a 90% in Judaism, essentially. They know you're not going to get 100%. They think they're being lenient by saying 90%. And I don't mean that I'm not saying what 10% you give up. But they'd like you to do everything that you possibly can, the way they would like you to do it. And the reason they want that is so that you will do what God wants, so that we will be pleasing to God, so that we will be redeemed and that the world will be redeemed. God has a different standard than we set for ourselves. And we don't necessarily know where that standard is for each of us. But just like God creates us all uniquely and individually, God also judges us uniquely and individually. Now, that doesn't mean you should say, I think God might love me, so I'm going to go do some bad stuff. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I guess I'm saying, don't get caught up on who fulfills what here. There are things that balance that. We haven't gotten to them yet because we're on page 15. There are thousands of pages and we're on page 15. So we're not seeing the whole picture here. This is like that line I love from the Disputation, where the Pablo Cristiani, the Jew who became a Christian, who's arguing against Nachmanides, Nachmanides said, Judaism's a little more flexible than you're giving it credit for. And Pablo Cristiani said, I didn't find it to be so when I was a Jew. And Nachmanides said, then perhaps there were things about Judaism you never understood. There are stringencies and there are leniencies, and we merge them together. And it's a long period of study. But there's plenty to credit the idea that spiritual closeness to God is important, and that it can be enhanced through ritual participation in the mitzvot God has set out for you. You can choose to engage in that or not. I can't make you, but that's up to you. I do think it'll help. It helps me. But your mileage may vary. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I said many things. So I've said enough things probably now.
No, I appreciate it.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Kind of took the pressure off me.
Well, then allow me to put the pressure back. No.
Yes.
It's like, then allow me to put the pressure back on. No. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to. So we said we did the last bit of this Mishnah, which was that one should return to the place in the Shema that they erred should they make a mistake. And now we get our little Gema entrance here, the abbreviation for Gemara, because we're gonna enter what the Gemara has said, and they're gonna give us a nice little. Steinsaltz is gonna give us a nice little intro, just by explaining the Mishnah. The discussion in our Mishnah dealt with the question of whether or not one who recites Shema without hearing it fulfilled his obligation. The Gemara clarifies the opinion cited in the Mishnah. So, now we've got to understand a little bit more, which was a question you all asked. What exactly are these rabbis' positions? Let's make sure we know Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Let's make sure we know exactly what it is we think they're saying. And again, it's not just people guessing. Theoretically, I say theoretically because I wasn't there, not because I don't believe it, but theoretically, the Gemara is based on the teachings of the students of the rabbis of the Mishnah. So if they say they meant this, you should assume they know what their teachers meant. That's at least the operating principle of the Gemara. If you believe the Gemara is just random later rabbis writing about what earlier rabbis said, that really breaks down the whole chain of transmission thing, at least from a divinity point of view. Okay, what is the reason for Rabbi Yossi's opinion, which is funnier because I think it just says, right, my Ta'ama de Rabbi Yossi. What is the reason for Rabbi Yossi? Which sounds different, right? It's like, what? Why is this? Why is this Rabbi Yossi? No, it's obviously what it means is what is the reason for his opinion? That one must recite Shema in a manner audible to his own ear. So obviously we need proof texts, even if they're not going to hold up. So we get one. Madiktiv, right? Here it says Mishum Diktiv. Okay, because it is written. Shema. That's literally right. He says Shema, and then he says Hashma la'oznecha ma she'ata motzi mipicha. Right? He's saying because it's written Shema, which means hear, and Rabbi Yossi holds this to be understood literally, meaning it says make your ears hear what your mouth says. So if you can't hear, then you can't do the Shema, according to Rabbi Yossi. The first Tana, and here we're just getting the Tana Kama. So the Tana Kama, and the Tana Kama is a big figure in the Talmud, who again is like this transitionary figure between the Zugot period and the Tanaim period. So the Tana Kama, who holds that one fulfills his obligation even if he does not hear his recitation of Shema, holds that Shema here comes to teach something else. Shema doesn't mean you have to hear the words that your mouth says. It comes to say one may recite Shema in any language that one can hear and understand. And there is no requirement to recite Shema specifically in Hebrew. So the Tana Kama is going to come in and say, no, it doesn't matter about what you hear, but rather that you can understand it in any language. And that's why it says Shema. That you as a people should hear regardless of the language you hear it in. Who are you with?
The first Tana.
The Tana Kama?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I'm just asking. Is anybody convinced?
To me, that hear also means understand even more than hear.
Okay.
And the word listen can be used, and that you don't have to hear it. That could mean assenting or understanding.
Okay. Could be.
So it's directed at us. Because hear, O Israel, but yet it applies universally. And so when the Arabs, when the Muslims say a similar thing, we're saying the same thing.
I'm sorry, say again?
If they say Allah Akbar, what does it mean?
God is great.
In the singular. And we say God is
Baruch
one.
Hashem. Well, no, we say I mean, technically, I guess the closest analog would be, we say similar things, although rarely not always in the same circumstances.
How far back in time does the Shema go, the prayer?
Oh,
Deuteronomy and.
Yeah, I mean, it's in Deuteronomy, so I guess it must be at least, at the minimum, at about 650 BCE, which is around the time of King Josiah of the kingdom of Judah, which is when we think, if Deuteronomy was written then, that's the latest it could have been written. It is possible that, like he says, he found it, at which point it could have been written by Joshua after the death of Moses. Or technically the tradition says Moses wrote it and Joshua finished the last letter, but because Moses died then. But, or the last, not the last letter, the last couple verses after Moses dies. Anyway.
Because I hear it as a command, Shema, more like we in English would say listen.
Right, here, right. Yeah.
But here, and it's, I always related it to the idea that there were two groups of Israelites worshiping a god by a different name and saying.
Well, again, that's the people who believe that Josiah is responsible for it, because Josiah lived in the time of a divided kingdom, and certainly it would help his theological argument to be able to say that all Jews should focus on Jerusalem, his capital, and not Shechem or Beit El, where the northern kingdom preferred to do its business and sacrifice. So there could be that. So we're gonna weigh in here that Rabbi Yossi, and remember Rabbi Yossi agrees with the first Tana. He's the one who came in and said, you have to correct yourself, but you don't have to hear it. And so he agrees with the principle derived by the Tanna Kama from the word Shema. However, he derives two halachot from when it says Shema. The first is the same as the Tanna Kama. He agrees with the Tanna Kama. The second is one must recite it in a manner audible to his own ears. Right? Because up here we got... Rabbi Yossi said he didn't fulfill his commandment because you have to say it out loud. It was Rabbi Yossi who said you don't have to do it you don't have to do it perfectly to count.
Right.
One sec. Okay. So Rabbi Yossi agrees with the Tanna Kama on you can say the Shema in any language, but he disagrees with the Tanna Kama saying it has to be audible in order to do it. And now we're going to ask about deaf people because there's a question, right? What do we do? And so it's going to say, Tanan Hatam, we learned there in a Mishnah regarding the laws of separating tithes, a deaf person who can speak but cannot hear may not separate truma, tithes to the temple, ab initio, they just can't. Because he must recite a blessing over the separation of truma, and he is unable to hear the blessing. But after the fact, if he did separate it, his truma is valid. Truma. Truma to truma.
So whether he said the blessing or not, he gave the tithe, and that's good.
He's Yotze.
Yeah, he did it.
Right. So they're saying he doesn't say the blessing. He doesn't need to say the blessing. His truma is valid because we don't hold him to it. It's not fair to hold someone to something they cannot possibly accomplish. Because he'll never be able to say it right.
You don't hear with your ear, you hear with your brain. The ear is a mechanical contraption. At least two of us are sitting here with amplifiers to help. But the actual distinction of those words are in the brain. So a person that understands it, who's completely deaf, hears it because it's in his brain.
But they won't hear. If I were, I really don't say this to be mean. I'm trying to elucidate a point. If you are deaf,
Yeah.
and I look at you, and I say, what did I just say? You didn't hear it.
No,
Their point is mechanical, but you didn't hear, like.
I didn't hear
yeah.
you say it. But if I say it in my mind.
If you say, yes, that's fine. Yes, you're right. You fulfill it either way yourself. You can say it in your mind, you don't have to. What they're trying to do is establish a leniency and say, you can say it in your mind, that's fine. But we're not going to, if you're sitting there and you're doing it, and somebody goes, hey, he's not saying the blessing, and somebody else goes, he's deaf, they go, oh. They don't ask anymore, that's it, it's over. Because there's a leniency. They're not required. Not that they should, not that they can't. In Reform, actually, the Orthodox would say they cannot. My answer is they can. They're just not obligated. Reform's view of obligation is that you can opt into it, even if you are not traditionally obligated. The biggest sense in which we do that, obviously, is in mitzvah she'aseh grama, or time-bound positive mitzvot, which are only incumbent on men, traditionally. All time-bound, except for 3. There are all only men are chayavim, are obligated. The Orthodox view is, since women are not obligated, choosing to take on that chumrah, that obligation, is blasphemy and is wrong, and they should not do it. The Reform view, my view anyway, the Reform view doesn't care so much, let everybody do everything. My specific theological view is that women can opt in. Therefore, make everyone obligated in time-bound positive mitzvot. Yeah, that's what I think. Anyone want to argue with me? In any event, it's important because that's the framework. That's the whole that's the whole way we're judging any of this. Yeah.
Can I kind of
Sure.
argue in a Gemara way?
Sure.
And I'm going to tell you what I do, but I don't mean to be seeking self-justification.
No worries.
If I'm here in congregation, I say the Shema out loud because I'm part of the congregation. If I'm at home, I say the Shema silently within myself. There's nobody to hear me except God and myself. And so I say it and understand what I'm saying in my brain. I would like to argue, other than just self-justification, that would be acceptable to God. That if my intent is right and I'm talking to Him and I'm understanding something.
You just say it in your brain or you move your mouth at all?
I probably move my lips, but there's no sound coming out.
Okay.
And I may not always move my lips.
You know what? I think whatever choice you make is great, but I would suggest maybe make the sounds. Who would it hurt?
Maybe my wife who's asleep while I'm saying it.
Well, I certainly would not recommend getting a megaphone and doing it that way. But if you found it in yourself to say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchutu Le'olam Va'ed, before you got into bed, that might be more praiseworthy.
Well, when I was teaching,
Because then you'll have fulfilled the mitzvah.
Of here.
You're so close. I'm just trying, it's like, again, there are reasons sometimes to pull back. But when one doesn't have one, I say, just go for it. Just go for it. So I'm not saying anything about the past, but I'm just saying maybe in the future, go for it. Try it out. See how it feels.
Well, when I was teaching writing classes, the hardest thing I found was to get because I really push this hard and read out loud what you write.
Yeah, it's true. You can often find where you messed up, or I can anyway. I think out loud is the best option for that. But again, I wouldn't do it loud. Might not. But yeah. Okay. So again, we get that the deaf person doesn't have to say it. They can just do the thing and they're good. Again, good I'm using the term good. The rabbis don't, if I were to say, oh, am I good? They'd be like, what? That doesn't mean anything to me. You are yotzei in this particular mitzvah. So when I say that, I'm using a shorthand, but I mean, the rabbis aren't thinking about it in the sense of like, am I doing enough? Am I doing this? Well, there's a mitzvah. Are you yotzei or are you not yotzei, right? So like, the rabbis are going to be much stricter. But the rabbis have a question about this that we just read. The Gemara asks, who is this Tana Kama, who holds that if a deaf person who can speak but cannot hear separates truma, it is considered truma after the fact, but ab initio he may not do so. And it says lechatchila, so from the beginning. Ab initio, in case you don't mean like from the beginning or at the outset. So that he shouldn't say that blessing. Rab Chisda says it is Rabbi Yossi. Let's just put that together. Because what? We only got half of Rabbi Yossi's opinion anyway. It says it is Rabbi Yossi, as we learned in our Mishnah, one who recites Shema and did not recite it so it was audible to his own ear, he fulfilled the obligation. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says he did not fulfill his obligation. So Rav Chisda is stupid. And now he's stupid on paper, which is the worst way to be stupid. But unfortunately, it happens sometimes.
But he's right, I think.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think Rabbi Yossi did say, if you don't
Yes.
say it out loud, you didn't do it.
So Rav Chisda is going to elaborate. Rav Chisda says, you're not going to call me a dummy and get away with it. I have more to write about this. He says, Rabbi Yossi only stated that a deaf person did not fulfill his obligation even after the fact with regard to the recitation of Shema, which is a biblical obligation. And now we're going to get an important thing we get to talk about. But with regard to Truma, the concern is due to the blessing recited over its separation. And the blessing is by rabbinic law. And the separation of Truma itself is not contingent upon the blessing. The separation of Truma takes effect regardless of whether or not a blessing is recited. So in the case of a deaf person, he fulfills his obligation after the fact. So here we're getting an important difference. What is the difference that Rav Chisda is saying that Rabbi Yossi is identifying?
The distinction between biblical and rabbinic law.
Absolutely. Distinguishing between something that is deoraisa, deoraisa in Ashkenazi pronunciation, deoraita, which is Aramaic for from the Torah, or something that is derabanan, something that is law instituted of the rabbis. Which is binding?
Which one has precedent?
Trick question. Both are binding. But that is a good question. Which one has precedent? Which one is more important? And the rabbis, reluctant as they are, will in some ways yes, but in some ways no, concede that a law deoraita takes precedence over a law that is derabanan, that is instituted by the rabbis. And in this case, that's not actually the problem. We won't get to it today. That's not actually the problem, because the while there is a separation here noted, the truma, the fact that the blessing over truma is instituted by rabbinic law doesn't matter, because truma takes effect regardless of whether there's a blessing. The blessing is just, it's kind of like how you can see a rainbow and offer the blessing the rabbis wrote for seeing a rainbow. You don't have to. You're not yotzei in the mitzvot of the Torah if you don't do it, but you can, and that would be praiseworthy. And they're saying that's what you get over the truma. If you say the blessing, you're a super good. You're like getting bonus points. You're like, everyone's like, oh, look at that machmir, this really stringent Jew who knows all the blessings and stuff over here, and that's great. Good for you. But if you didn't, you also don't really have to. Just doing the thing is doing the mitzvah. So they're saying the blessing isn't really required in fulfilling the mitzvah, and actually what that means is this is a bad proof for deaf people. Because there's another problem with it. And the Torah and the Talmud is constantly trying to find reasons that can't be sloughed away because of other reasons. So they're going to go through more than this, but we unfortunately don't have time because I have a committee meeting at 12:30. So I appreciate your time. Thank you all for joining us for a session of Talmud.